Hello and welcome, Jessie Gender. Everybody give a little clap. Hello and welcome everybody to Topics, the channel that seeks to highlight the blatant sexism, misogyny, and transphobia of gender-based censorship, one heinous female nipple at a time. As you can see, I am extremely excited today because I have a special guest, Ophelia! No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, to be fair, Ophelia is much more special than I am. That is absolutely correct.
The inimitable Jessie Gender. I am, in fact, going to be taking my shirt off very soon, which I did clear with Jessie ahead of time. I'm
yes,
not going to
I'm giving consent.
Okay, now we're going to start the video for real. Yeah, I actually just came out with a video that I said I'm not going to be posting to YouTube anymore, which I'm still, like, conflicted about because, as you know, not using mainstream platforms is really hard as a content creator.
Yeah, I'm surprised you even try to do it because like I get frustrated at YouTube, but it's like I still don't know how to like. I send people to Nebula, but it's like it's nice, but it's not mainstream enough, and it doesn't get any traction with anything.
Yeah,
so it's very
I always watch your stuff on Nebula.
It's good. It's good. It's just like there's no way to like build buzz around a video because like the recent thing with like Amelia Perez. Like that video did really, really well, but it got censored and people went to Nebula to watch. But it's like if I just put it there would be no conversation, no buzz around it. So it's like
yeah, I know. I watched it. It was wild because I watched it when you put it on your Patreon, and I thought it was interesting and stuff. But when you mentioned all the the copyright infringement and everything like that, I was like, really? Like,
I mean, what's frustrating about it is like I put up the initial version. It got some like copyright claims as YouTube videos tend to do if you put up stuff, but I thought it was fine. They released it. Then the Gascon stuff came out with all of her racist tweets. So then I re-edited it to like add in just like a mention of that. Like I didn't even have that much. I just added like 2 minutes of like, hey, she had racist tweets. This kind of proves what I was talking about, but I didn't go into much detail because it was like right at the start of that. But when I uploaded that one, they issued a copyright strike. Which is like ridiculously wild, and it's like the only thing that changed between now and then. I don't even know if they watched my entire video, but what had changed was the conversation around Gascon. So it's like, well, there must have been some policy change behind the scenes there that was like, all right, well, now you just need to strike. Yeah. So it's like that's the reason. Like that is the reason. Like it has to be. Whether or not they did it specifically because my video is talking about it or not, that's beside the point. Like the reason is because they're trying to do damage control. So it's just like you're attacking my livelihood for like shit that everyone's talking about. And it's also frustrating as a trans creator, but I've already spoken about all that.
Well, anyways, and you did a video. It's on your second channel, I think, After Dark. Yeah. Going into more detail. So cat hair.
Yeah, there was cat hair. I was trying to play it off like you couldn't see. But no, I did the other two, and it was I mean, we can. I don't know if this is part of your interview or not.
I don't know. I'll fit this in somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's always the fun part. But the big thing that's getting me right now is just the trans misogyny of it all. About how it's like, all right, we're gonna ignore all the racism and transphobia of the movie, of the director. And then just put it all on this one trans person who, like, to be fair, is a piece of shit. Like, she's awful. But it is not, like, she's not the bad part about the movie. Like, if anything, she is the best part of the movie.
All 5 minutes that she's in it.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, it's just, like, this trans misogyny of, like, oh, we'll ignore all the horrible things about the movie, but like one trans woman being a piece of shit, that will like destroy the whole movie's chances and create this whole conversation, and Hollywood will distance itself from the entire film and all that jazz, and still give sympathy to the director about like, oh, how much the poor trans woman has like ruined the chances of these poor artists, So it's just it's all around a very gross discussion around the film from top to bottom. So.
And what is amazing about it, and it's funny because I like haven't even addressed my list of questions yet. But one of the things I was actually going to talk to you about in a little bit is criticism from the left versus criticism from the right. And I feel like this is kind of a clear example of someone being really shitty towards one marginalized group, but being like, well, but I'm a trans woman, so nothing I say could be wrong. And it's
Yep,
like,
yep, yep.
you know, if you've been in leftist spaces enough, especially online, like I quit Twitter in 2022, but I'm still seeing the same kind of stuff like
You're
on
smart.
Blue
Yep.
Sky and everything else, where it's
Hmm.
like if you hit this category, then you can't possibly do anything wrong. And I mean, that's just so not true.
Yeah, it's definitely not true, and it's like it's just so frustrating because when you do attempt to call that out and discuss it, both from like the two different ways that it can happen, like of you can have a marginalized person saying like, "Oh, I can't possibly be racist. I can't possibly be
Hmm.
offensive." It's like you call that out and you're like, "Well, you're the transphobe. You're the racist. You're
Yeah.
da 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 da
You're the
da."
anti-Semite, blah blah blah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then if you do like, but then there's you could also just talk about the left as just a general thing with I mean, not that Hollywood is the left, but it's sort of indicative of a similar dynamic. But like,
According to right
oh, there's
wingers, it's the
yeah, they're
wokest of woke.
the woke liberal leftist communist anarchistic all of the things in one package despite them being very disparate
Woke
ideologies.
spotting.
Yeah. But like you see that what am I trying to say? That you see that like same sort of thing of like, oh, they'll uphold like white supremacy and things like that in the name of progress, but they won't do anything to like be willing to break down their own ingrained biases and just believe that they're immune from anything because they're liberal or progressive or
Hmm.
whatever. It's
They
very,
have
very
this
frustrating.
idea of themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
I did a video years ago, and I still keep finding relevant situations to bring it up, where it's called the fallacy of good men, and it was
Mm-hmm.
inspired by Hannah Gatsby's stand-up Nanette.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
basically she was saying, you know, good men, give yourself a clap, and then she was like, you're gonna regret that. And basically
Mm-hmm.
my video went into, and it was a very, you know, not scripted or anything, but it was very the idea that like you think of yourself as a good person, therefore
Yep.
it's difficult to imagine that you could ever be racist or transphobic or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm trying not to be. But then the flip side of that is learning to sift through legitimate criticism and an excuse to be a
Mm-hmm.
bully. And
Yep.
that,
That's it's hard to do in the internet age too because like everything comes at you at once and
yeah.
it's hard to like emotionally hold it. Like I even try to deal with that where I like there are things that I fucked up and I want to listen to criticism, but like the two elements of it are like it's hard to emotionally hold space for that
Mm-hmm.
when you're like I'm angry at the bad faith people or the assholes
Mm-hmm.
or the jerks, so you're like trying to like hold space for legitimate criticism while also not like getting angry at every single thing that you see because of the bad faith stuff.
Yeah, because you
And
can't
then all
counteract all of it, and it doesn't matter because a lot of people have already formed an opinion about you. And so
mm-hmm.
anything you say, it's, oh, they're backtracking, oh, they're whatever. So,
Yep. And also the other part of it too is like you can't, especially as like a public figure, we live in this like day and age. It's like the Donald Trumpian era of like you can never admit defeat or whatever,
yeah.
and it's frustrating because there are things where like, oh, I would love to talk about these things and like have a nuanced conversation about like, hey, I think I might have screwed this up, or like I think there's some nuance here that like we could discuss it, and I can this is my way of thinking. Like, but if you do that, then you have the bad faith people being like, well, see, I won, or they're a horrible person, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like you can't have that conversation ever, and it's very, very frustrating of like we just live in this culture of like everyone has to sort of like present this face of like I'm perfect or I'm pure or
Yeah.
whatever,
And of
and
course, it's a
it's
minefield because
mm-hmm.
what's fine for one person is totally awful for the other. Anyway, so restarting,
Yes.
we had technical issues already, so we were changing it around. But so actually, I'm gonna take this moment to kind of try to organize this a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Um,
Yeah, we started just randomly chatting
you
about it and
know,
got into like deep issues off the top.
I mean, like, that's why I was really excited about this interview, is because, you know, obviously I'm not nearly as famous as you, but
I'm not really that famous either. It's yeah.
but I feel like we have a lot of the same situations as far as like what we've
Mm-hmm.
dealt with online. And again, going off topic, but I've been feeling kind of conflicted this year because like everything is horrible, of course, and getting
Mm-hmm.
rapidly worse by the day. But like in my own life, in my own life, like I feel like this interview happening and stuff like that, like
Mm-hmm.
good things are happening, and I'm just like, how do I feel okay about things happening in my life while everything else is so bad in the world?
No, I mean I get that feeling too, but it's like you got to focus on that stuff. We need that stuff. Like the whole point of all the shitty stuff going on is they want to exhaust you. They want to make you feel depressed and sad and isolate yourself. It's like, if you focus on the good things you have and focus on community and focus on building that up, that's equally, if not sometimes more important than, getting upset and fighting back against the terrible stuff. In some ways, I mean, not to say that we shouldn't fight back against the terrible stuff. We should, most certainly. But like, there's something that we need to be focusing on what we're building as well. Because if we're not building something, if we're not making, if we're not fighting for something, then I don't even know what we're doing.
Yeah, I actually was just watching your video while I was waiting for our allotted time about why leftists should vote. And, you did a very careful dance of not invalidating anyone's, reason for voting or not voting. But I really liked how you were pointing out that it serves the powers that be if we're all spending so much time, policing each other to be the perfect leftists, that fascism is just marching in unchecked.
Exactly. And what's funny with that video, that was the video I've never lost more subscribers than on that video. That was the video I lost the most subscribers. And it was all the folks of like, oh, you support genocide, like, oh, I'm gonna vote Green Party, like, da 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 da. I'm like, the two things that frustrate me about that is like, one, you think Trump's going to be better? It's clearly we can see that has not been the case, and there's no strategy. It's all just sort of like, I want to remain pure, and it kind of goes to like what we were talking about earlier about like everyone attacking everyone else and putting everyone else down, and it's a purity culture sort of thing that is cuts across any political divide, in that people want to be like, say that they are pure. It's the same reason you see people say like, well, I always hated Harry Potter. I always knew Harry Potter was terrible. Like just wanting to never have any of this stuff kind of touch their goodness in any way. It's like, oh, I'm a good person and I need to hold on to that. Yeah. When we really should be talking about like how like we're all going to screw up, cause harm, hurt other people. But the way to get through that is acknowledging that and working to try to do better by each other, to try to acknowledge each other, to have empathy for each other.
Not always assume the worst intent.
Yeah, exactly. And just try and build from that. And I think that that's how we build lines of solidarity, is when we see each other and acknowledge like things are going to be perfect. Like there's going to be friction. There's going to be things where we see differently on, but try to work through it. And none of that is the case. And that's how it isolates us. Like all of that stuff about purity culture and that sort of thing, that culture of defeat, I think is sometimes called, is it's a tool by the powerful to keep us isolated from each other, to have us going at each other. And it's also like this annoying other thing of too, like no one wants to see a diversity of tactics or to recognize different perspectives, because it's like, look, and this is the thing I was talking about in that video, right, where it's like, I certainly understand why anybody would not want to vote for Kamala, like 100% get it. She's terrible. She is, she's supporting also the genocide. She's doing a billion other things. She's hurt trans people in the past.
It's the do you drink piss or do you drink arsenic?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I also understand too the like argument of like, these two things are like the choice is a false choice. Like it is the people in power giving us like, well, you want the piss or do you want the arsenic? Might as well drink the piss. And then saying like, that's where you should stop. It's like, well, you drank the piss, so like you did your engagement. And like, no, what you do is that's a stalling strategy, so we have more time to actually do the things that we actually want to do. And I get frustrated by people being like, we shouldn't engage at all. It's like, don't waste time on electoral politics in terms of like going out and stumping for them or doing all these things, like and try to call people. Like, don't really waste time doing that, but at least engage in it so that you can have more time for your like what we want to do. Because right now we're under Trump, we're spending like all this time dealing with exhaustion, people being distracted by all the bullshit that he's doing, and not actually getting to like focus on building. Yeah, exactly. And it's like if Kamala was here, like I'm not saying things would be good, but we'd have more energy to build other things and to grow other things. And trans people wouldn't be trying to just survive, and other groups wouldn't just be trying to survive, immigrants and things like that. But now we're stuck in that situation, and it's just no sense of strategy, no sense of consciousness, no sense of solidarity. And it's like, it's just with that video, it's like, I got so much shit of like, oh, you're supporting this. It's like, no, it's like, just have some, and also have some sense of like why I would want to as a trans woman, versus someone else. It's like, I understand why you wouldn't want to, and I'm not going to begrudge you necessarily for not. But what I am saying is like, understand that as a person whose identity as a trans person right now is under direct attack by this administration, like the goal of that is to elicit me to go on this lines towards Kamala, because it's saying, oh, well, you're the minority under attack right now, so you're either going to vote this way or that way. It's like, I have an incentive to vote for Kamala. It like, for certain other people probably don't in other regards, like Palestinians, I understand, or like people who align that way, like,
but
I understand, like, they don't see it either way. Yeah.
Also suffering under Trump, because, well, first of all, you got people who are like going to lose their Medicare and everything like that. You've got the explosion of disease. I mean, RFK is going to be in charge of whatever net pandemic, you know. We've got anyone with brown skin, regardless of whether they came here legally or not, facing getting kicked out of the country. Even Native Americans, which is just absolutely wild. Like, it's not all of us hate the genocide. All of us are furious about the genocide. To put my head out there, get myself on the chopping block, there are other marginalized groups that are also being affected right now. And like you said in the video, whether you vote for Kamala or Trump, the genocide is not going to stop. So anyway, that
and arguably it's worse under Trump, but that's a conversation for a
oh no,
whole other podcast.
I think it's definitely worse. But
yeah.
All right, so wow, that was just jumping right into that.
Very simple. We haven't even gotten a good introduction yet, and we're already talking about.
I'm
genocide.
terrible. I'm sorry. It's my fault.
No,
I have ADHD,
it's a good.
So.
I also am a neurodivergent autistic person, so I will like hyperfixate on something and rant for a really long time.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Okay. Right. Like you said, proper intro. So, I feel like those like 90s movies where it's like, how did I get you?
Yeah.
So, would you mind introducing yourself, your pronouns, and what you consider yourself to be as far as like content creator and all that other stuff?
Yeah. My name is Jessie Earl, aka Jessie Gender on YouTube. That's where that is my YouTube name. Pronouns she, they. And I guess the best way to describe myself is I'm a YouTuber, content creator, make video essays. Excuse me. And then also I'm a filmmaker as well. So made a movie called Identities, which is a science fiction film that's on Nebula. And then working on other projects as well that I can't announce at the moment, but other filmmaking things that
you're achieving the dream of branching out from not just recording in your bedroom, which is, I mean, valid. I mean, how many people's hearts and minds have been changed by someone talking on a camera in front of their bedroom? But
yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things where like I have no problem with it. Like I'm fine with being called a YouTuber. I'm happy with that. But especially like working in like Hollywood stuff, if you say that, they pigeonhole you a whole as that. And like there's this thing in Hollywood where you have to kind of say what you want to be before you actually are it. Like,
I'm an actor.
Yeah, fake it till you make it sort of thing. Yeah. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm a filmmaker. And like I am, like I made a movie. So I'm not saying I'm lying, but it's like, oh, like I have to kind of put that forward.
Yeah, you got to punch that imposter syndrome in the face.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the short version of who I am. So. Do
you remember when was it Billie Eilish who went viral they had a clip of her at a award show or something, and she's like, "What are the TikTokers doing here?"
It's just funny you say that because like I've had like I know some showrunners of shows, and I went up to them like I would talk to them and like just we'd like be having a conversation. I'd be like, hey, you're doing what I want to do one day. Like I would love to run a show. I would love to make that sort of stuff. And they look at me as like, well, my kids want to do what you want to do. They look at me and be like, I don't give a shit about what Dad's doing. I want to do what Jessie's doing. I'm like, it's all just a weird thing of
they're
like
very different worlds, I'm sure. So yeah, it's funny because I've been I have cat hair in my lipstick. It's funny because I've actually been making videos since the very first year of YouTube's existence.
Oh,
and wow. So yeah, I know a sane person would have given up by now, but I've seen how it has evolved, changed so much, where like in the early years I was trying to get people to act in videos with me and everything, and they're like, no, that's weird. And then the last 5-10 years it's been like, oh, I can become rich and famous doing YouTube. And now people come to me and they're like, how can I be rich and famous on YouTube? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not rich and famous, so probably
Yeah, right? Yeah.
not the best. But second of all, that should not be your goal. First of all, it's probably not going to happen. And second of all, there's easier ways to get rich and famous. So it's like,
yeah.
So
I mean, you gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta just make for what you want to make, right? Like, if you're not doing this out of some joy or some passion for it, then like there's no point really. And I've met those kind of people, who are just doing something just to do it. Like there was I won't say his name, but I worked at the Advocate, theadvocatepride.com, like Out Magazine, that sort of company. It's all one company that runs all those. And there was this guy who was an intern, and he was just constantly trying to get on red carpet interviews and just constantly trying to do all the like celebrity stuff. And I asked him, it's like, he's just like, oh, I just want to do like famous stuff. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? What are you trying to say? What's the message you're trying to say? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I just want to be famous. And I'm like what? I don't understand that. Like I get, it's just, again, that celebrity culture. No, he was older than me. I mean, I guess young in the sense that like I was young, but like he was older than I was, and so it was just it's just people who's just like seeking for validation through like institutions or structure or fame, and they just want to feel like they're validated as a person by these institutions. Like, and maybe it's because I'm trans, and it's like I'm never gonna get validated by these institutions, but I don't really seek that. Like, there's. It would be nice to like, have my things take off or people talk about things. I would like that, but it's all in facilitation of like, oh, I want that so that I can make more art and get a chances to make more art, so.
And of course, that's a big difference with being a bread tuber creator or whatever, is you probably care about the things that you're making videos about, and you want to do right by it, and you want to actually like inform and change people's minds. Whereas someone on the right, the Joe Rogan, I don't even want to get into that, but
Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro,
all those people, like they're happy screaming at a camera about marginalized people, and they'll get super famous. And so it's a lot easier for them. They don't have to put any thought into their kind of content, whereas you put a lot of work into writing your script, into trying to represent different viewpoints and not be like, well, if you differ from mine, then you're dumb and blah blah blah. And so that takes a lot of work. And your videos, honestly, it's funny because there's like your genre of like video essay and stuff like that, and then there's like the commentary types like Hasanabi and stuff like that, where they're just in front of a camera and they're just blah, 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 blah. And sometimes they'll make really good points, sometimes they're fucking assholes. Like it's...
yep I mean, that's the thing with like being on camera every single set. I couldn't do it. I'd be exhausted, and like you're gonna have shit takes, and like I think there's a certain there are the shit debate bro folks that I won't get into because it'll cause a whole fuss. But like with someone like Hassan, like I think he generally does a really good job, and I think he's a good spot for people to get into things. But he's I think a lot of the time he's like, I don't want to say the junk food. I think that's like too disparaging, but like not like the
accessible,
like really digging in. Yeah, accessible. And he's it's not like delving into the meat of these things. And I wish that like there was a better way to like get people from him into like going into like deeper topics, because a lot of like where people go for him, and it's not saying that he is this,
and I don't mean just Hassan, that's the name that popped in my head.
No, he's just an example. And I think like he's one of, to be fair, he's one of the better, like I think he's a better example. Like I think he does generally good work.
Well, there's a certain other figure that's popping into my head, but I'm not saying their name because you guys have a history. So
yeah, we don't need to talk about
he who must not be named.
Yeah, I mean, there's several too. But like, regardless, don't even need to get into it. But it's like it's a lot of that stuff is just, speaking with just Hassan, like it's still like that, like sort of like, oh, we're going after. It kind of goes into that other element of like, what are we fighting for? Because I think a lot of like his stuff and that sort of content is taking down people or pushing back against whatever the dominant conversation is, the news cycle is. And like that's helpful and can be good in a certain way. Like we need to have that information out there and people talking about that stuff. But at a certain point, it's like, what are you directing people towards in terms of like building something new or building up like alternative ways of thinking? And that's the hardest. I think that's the hardest thing, and probably a lot of what my content just kind of shift that is like trying to get people to be like, we can think about these things in a different way than just pushing back against hating, hating the right and hating, like getting angry at them. It's like, we need to be thinking of a new consciousness, a new way of like discussing these things.
And that honestly, that was one thing that you were talking about in your YouTube is Destroying Us Creators video, which was phenomenal. And I am, again, it's just one of those things that I'm like getting in conversation with people. I'm like, you got to go watch this video. Like it so perfectly distills so much of what I've tried to explain to people as far as like age gating and stuff like that. And from your experience, it's been more the weaponization of like copyright and stuff like that. But the end of the day, it's still deplatforming. It's still taking the voice away from people who are advocating for something that they care about. And in my case, for instance, what was the final straw, which is why I decided I'm at least for now going to stop posting to YouTube, is I had a years old video that was me fully clothed, merely just talking to the camera. It was like a 2-minute video of me saying, I'm frustrated with cis male nudists who ignore my fight for topless equality to talk about full body nudity because they want to free their entire bodies. And that was literally, it was like, I'm just so freaking tired of these cis male nudists constantly like ignoring my fight to focus on theirs. YouTube banned it as sexually explicit nudity. and denied my appeal. And so it's just like, and again, like in your sense, in your case with the copyright, Daily Wire and stuff like that, these are massive, expensive mechanisms with teams of lawyers. And in the end of the day, don't rely on YouTube, don't rely on Facebook, don't rely on any of these mega corporations to care about you as a creator. You're not. They will always throw you under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's again the institution, right? It's what are we upholding as an institution and institutional power? Because I think a lot of the stuff that I get flagged for like, kissing my fiance or something on screen, it's like I don't think it's any, it might now be considering how corporations are starting to shift more overtly to bigotry, but like, at the time it was like, I expect it less. There's someone sitting at Google or YouTube and being like, trans people, I hate them. And more a like just ingrained bias against like, 2 women kissing, that's sexual, right? That has to inherently be sexual. Or 2 trans people kissing, that's inherently sexual. And just having that ingrained bias in them and making that flip. And it just disproportionately affecting me because that's who I am. That's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about trans issues. I have a wife. I'm going to kiss her. Like I'm
How
going
dare
to
you?
like, yeah, right. And so it's like it's just these things are going to disproportionately affect us because these are the things that we're going to talk about. And it's just upholding the dominant cultural view of who we are. And then the people like the Daily Wire or, even Netflix to a degree, which we were talking about with Amelia Perez and all that stuff earlier on. But like Daily Wire is a much more like vicious example of it, of like they will for now they will weaponize these biases so that they can create like, so they can like just attack people based on those biases. It's like the reason that people are able to attack trans women like me is because there's all these ingrained assumptions on society that people have around trans people that like then the Daily Wire capitalizes on and upholds and virulently feeds to create a culture of hate towards trans people because like
you're the
people
scapegoat.
Exactly. And it's something I see. It's why I've been talking a lot about like the issues on the left a lot more lately too. It's because like the right wing are going to do that, but because they have these ingrained biases that like they are starting to feed, and as that becomes much more of the conversation, when I as a trans woman or any marginalized person starts to speak up against like, hey, this is not just a right wing problem, this is a problem of our institutions. People who don't want to, like, they're willing to attack the virulent bigots, but aren't willing to question the institutions, aren't willing to question their own ingrained biases. So they will start getting angry at the marginalized person speaking up because they don't want to question these things. They don't want to have any internal reckoning with themselves or how our society is built because they're built to be sitting fairly comfortably, or at least are comfortable where they're at or don't want to lose more in their in society now. And so they'll attack the marginalized person speaking up rather than the bigots, or they'll see the marginalized person and the bigots as equally bad. Because we're both attacking. The right wing people aren't even really attacking the status quo. They're just virulently feeding it, and it's like all consuming fire. But like but like they'll see us as equally bad because we're attacking. Marginal people will attack the status quo, saying that it's not good for us and we need to think of something different. And because they sit comfortably in the status quo or are unwilling to lose whatever comfort they do have, if they sit at some sort of axis of privilege and marginalization, like cis white women who are TERFs.
I was like,
they're not. Yeah, no, not you. Who are TERFs? Who are TERFs? Usually upper class cis white women. Class is usually the biggest indicator, because upper class white trans women will also be pieces of shit. Look at Carla Sofia Gascon as an example. Even though like she arguably white passing, I should say. Anyways, like long and short of it is like people are not willing to question their own ingrained biases and will attack marginalized people who speak out against it because they don't want to lose their place of whatever nominal privilege they have.
And of course, there's also the projection aspect of it, which is something that I see a lot, where it's like, if I call someone else racist, then I couldn't possibly be racist. And it's like, you're not actually helping the argument. And or the opposite of, like the not all men thing, like, oh my God, I'm so tired of not all men. It's like, you can't critique anything without a guy being like, well, all men aren't like that. Nobody said that all men were. But you stopping the conversation to assuage your personal feelings is why the bad thing perpetuates. So yeah, I think that's on the same page for that.
And like not talking about like incentives, right? Like what are men incentivized to do? And it's like maybe you're not, but like maybe you are not contributing to this directly, but like men as a like cultural group are incentivized to do this thing and will take advantage of it. And even people who say like, I'm not all men, I don't do that. There will be times when you will, when you are asked to when the chips are down and you're the one facing the problem, you'll be sort of feel the pull to be like, all right, well, I'll do that because it will protect me better.
Yeah.
Even if you don't sort of think of yourself that way. And it's defining ourselves against something instead of what we are and what we want. And that's ultimately what this culture, what fascism ultimately wants, an us versus them narrative. Like if you're defining yourself against what you are fighting, then ultimately you're not going to break it down. It's like there's a great quote by Ursula K. Le Guin that I love, which is to oppose something is to uphold it. And it's like what we need to be doing. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's like if you're only defining yourself against what you're fighting, then you're ultimately not going to break it down. And the way I always like to talk about things is like, you need to choose what you are fighting for. What do you want? Articulate what you want.
Yeah.
And
this
fight
is
for
the bad
that.
thing. So what would the good thing be, and how do you get there?
Yeah, and like fight for what you want, and the things that are in your way, go through them and fight through them. So it's like when there was like this whole thing that I got in trouble for online where I said like leftism isn't about winning. And yeah, was a whatever quote on Twitter or whatever people
freaking Twitter.
But like it's dumb Twitter takes. But like the point ultimately that I was getting at is like, it's not about beating people. It's not about beating the Matt Walshes or beating the Ben Shapiros or beating even the Trumps, right? Like the goal shouldn't be just to beat them. The goal is to say, I want to build a society that enables everybody to live their best lives, to build a society where communities like enable each other and uplift each other and are supportive of each other. And we don't need to rely on these big institutions built on white supremacy to care for each other. That's what I want. And in the effort to fight for that, to get to that, to build that, yes, I will need to take down the Matt Walshes. I will need to take down the Donald Trumps.
But that's not the end goal.
Yeah, that's not my focus. My focus is building this thing, and whatever gets in my way of building that thing, I will fight. But it is not my goal.
Yeah.
And
versus debate bros, where their entire thing is to win.
I won the debate. I took them down. Like, we beat them with facts and logic.
Yeah.
Like it's the same logic. And ultimately, you're just upholding a culture of strength and power. And it's like we should be trying to break down cultures of power and venerating power. Says the anarchist.
Well, what I was saying about your YouTube is destroying its creator video is that I liked at the end how you were talking about like more concrete things, what we can do, and by we I mean creators, but also people who support creators, to get around, like to not let ourselves be, sounds cheesy, but not let ourselves be silenced by these major platforms who are, especially, with Zuckerberg and everybody kissing the ring for Trump, they're going to get even more and more and more censorious. What can we solidly do to help each other? And would you mind this interview is jumping all over the place, but whatever.
It's fine. It's fine.
Would you mind kind of giving some examples of what that would be, like concrete actions that we could do to help get around the censorship?
I mean, different things are like we need to. I mean, I do think we need to unionize is like a big thing. Like I point to Nebula. Nebula. Trying to make sure I don't get in trouble with Nebula, but like Nebula ultimately is a company. It's a profit. It's a streaming service. Like their goal is profit. Like the people on top of it are trying to like, and everyone, but like I'm making money off of it. Like I'm the way it structures the whole thing. But like at the end of the day, like it is a company trying to make money. It is a profit-driven enterprise, but it is, I think, the closest thing to a union, to like a collective thing that we have against YouTube. In that, like, if I have an issue, then I can go to Nebula, and there's a sort of power block there of like bigger creators even than I am, like that can go and be like, hey, this isn't okay. So like if something happens like with the copyright,
there's a pipeline
stuff,
to an actual live person.
Yeah. Yes, like the copyright strike stuff. When I get copyright struck, I can go to Nebula and be like, hey, I need to know what's going on from YouTube, and they'll listen. Less probably because it's me and more because Nebula's there, because there is this sort of block of YouTubers, and it kind of functions like a union in that way.
They have arguing powers, bargaining
exactly
powers.
Yes, like collective bargaining powers, exactly. And so like there's a limit to that, because again, it is a company, it's trying to make money, and that's what it is. Not to disparage it. Love Nebula, to support me and do a lot of things, so it's not disparaging, it's just like what the goal
reality
is. But I think that's what we need to be doing more as creators and YouTubers, and trying to speak up and make those connections to each other, I think is like one of the best concrete goals that we can have. And it's difficult, right? Because the problem with YouTube and a lot of online stuff today is like we are so isolated from each other,
and
online.
controlled in what we're able to share with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And like in other union efforts, like you work alongside people, right? Like I work right next to the person in the Starbucks that I work at, or the factory that I work at. Like you have that ability. Whereas we live all over YouTubers live all over the world, have different socioeconomic backgrounds, like have different things going on. And so it's hard
different
to create
time zones.
that. Exactly. Yeah. And it's just hard to create that consciousness. Like we all are YouTube creators, so there is some level of shared struggle, but it's hard to create that consciousness to build up that effort for a union. And that's sort of the hard part. And I think that's part of like, so this is getting slightly off your topic, but I think it's just like one of the issues that the internet is a problem. It's like I was talking about the Dreaming of a Queer Internet video that I did, which is like the internet has been segmented and pushed against each other. And I think that this is an element of it, where like the internet in early days was a way to unify people who weren't like trans people, queer people who like may not have another trans person in their community, but could find that community online. Now it is like we are all working and living on the internet, but because we are not physically near each other, we have been isolated from each other and can easily be set against each other and misunderstand each other, because the platforms on which we are communicating with each other are owned by corporations, be it Twitter, be it or Facebook, or even Discord to a degree too. Like we are limited on our like ability to collectively organize, because we have no physical spaces to be able to do that outside of corporate control.
And people fall for this illusion until they personally deal with the arbitrary censorship. Like they don't understand how easily you can just get banned or whatever.
Yep.
And well, I promise I'm not going to go too into depth about this, because people, their eyes roll back in their head. But I think that the only tangible thing we have at our fingertips is decentralization. Like Mastodon and stuff like that, because in a nutshell, they're individual servers that communicate with each other, but there's no central authority that can just be like, you're allowed to exist, you're banned. And I get frustrated with people joining Blue Sky. Like, I'm on Blue Sky too, you're on Blue Sky, but they don't seem to understand that Blue Sky is still, at the end of the day, a corporate, single entity. So
the thing that bugged the hell out of me is like, I think it was just a little bit after there was that one of the numerous mass exoduses from Twitter over to Blue Sky. There was like a post that the people who make Blue Sky put up that was like, well, eventually we're gonna start monetizing it, and and there were people like championing it, like, oh, good, yeah, that makes sense. It'll like make it more profitable and make it better to like run and like get it back to like where Twitter was. And I'm like, you know, like not understanding how that like that is also it just is
Yeah.
evidence of like how horrible it is. Like the thing that people don't realize with Elon Musk, everyone points to Elon Musk taking control of Twitter, and that's when it was shit. And I'm like, all the things that Elon Musk did was
Exacerbate.
just throwing fuel on a fire that already existed. Like the problem with Twitter is that it set us against each other. Like whenever I would tweet something, you would either have like the narrative was set up as that you are either for or against it, and you can never
The pancakes and waffles debate.
Yeah, exactly. And there would be no, because it's so limiting in what it's allowed to say is like how many characters you get. There's no nuance, and I cannot tell you how many times I would get frustrated where I would like tweet something and like it would start a whole discourse on like you hate waffles, like whatever the conversation was, and it's like I don't disagree with you. I would love to have that conversation, but I can't put that nuance into a tweet, and it just caused it like Jessie believes X or Y or whatever, and it's like no, I'd rather have a whole conversation about it. And then again, that is part of how this culture works. Like they set us against
like
each
you
other
said, the guy that wants to
way.
be famous, like his goal is to be famous, and you know Twitter incentivizes. Who cares if you have a that nuanced argument? We want the hottest take. We want the most viral 180 character thing you can do. And so even if you are, you know, again, like with the leftist video essay where you're putting all this thought and scripting and everything into it versus pure reactionary content, stuff like Twitter and also Facebook and anything, because of people's attention span, they don't they incentivize the opposite of that. They want you to be a snapshot so someone can read this single tweet and be like, so and so believes this and is this and is this and is this, and I don't care what you say against it, you're just
No, I agree. And even like leftist, I mean, I talk about that in the YouTube video too, where it's like
again,
even the video
amazing video. Thank you so much. You took the words out of my mouth. Anyway.
Well, no, I appreciate that. But like the thing with that I was even talking about is like I my videos tend to be so long is because I end up trying to have to explain my point of view as a trans person. So I like put all these caveats and all these explanatory things of like, here's where I'm coming from. But even that, like, number one, becomes unwieldy for people. So it's hard to like do that. And then people, the bad faith people, or the people who are looking for things to hate or coming in an antagonistic reading. Like there's people who come in bad faith looking for bad things, and then there are people who come in with an antagonistic read, which is like they're ready to take away a bad faith reading from it, like because that's how they're engaging with it. But regardless, like people will find that stuff because they can take little bits and pieces of these long works to be able to sort of frame it that way. And it's like you're not looking at the things that I am saying or the things that I'm trying to talk about or the ethos that I'm trying to talk about. And it's because it's not, it's not a conversation, right? Like it's still, I saw this one video essay, this was years ago, that was very interesting. I don't know if I entirely agree, but they made a really interesting point of like YouTube is in some ways it feeds a sort of an authoritarian view in the sense that like when you're a leftist essayist or like any essayist or anyone making these things, you are making a video that's like, here's an authority. Here's like research, and like not to say that like if you're doing your research, if you're making it work, and like it's a good thing, but it's not. You're making this parasocial relationship, which is sort of like, oh, I'm creating this conversation, but you're not. And so it's this harder sort of way to be like, it's this harder conversation to sort of say like, we should be having conversations about these things rather than it just sort of being like, here's the hot take or here's my take. So.
And again, sorry, I'm just like stuff that pops in my head. We can cut it if we want, but going back to Twitter, also there's a whole industry of grifters who literally make money off of starting shit, off of being like, I'm going to quote tweet this person and get all my followers to agree with me. And I don't think it's possible. Like it takes great amount of effort to stay humble, to not feel like, well, I have a million retweets, therefore everything I say must be correct. And to like you said, keep space for a good faith argument and not feel like you are an authority, like, well, XYZ marginal group.
I'm
so,
hot shit. Yeah. I mean, it feeds again that sort of, like this, and again, it cuts across. I mean, it's much more overt on right wing stuff because they intentionally foster that for the most part, and other people in like leftist spaces do the same thing. They will intentionally foster that as well. Sort of like I am the authority on XYZ or whatever.
Debate bros.
Yeah, the debate bro thing of like you need to listen to me and everyone else is shit. Like it's like. That sort of, but again, it's much more virulent on the right with this space. Yeah. So like I know what I'm talking about. Like, but it all just goes to that sort of desiring to accumulate power. That's what our society tells you to do: accumulate followers, accumulate attention, accumulate money. Like, and as a result of that, you need to do the Donald Trumpian thing of like never admit defeat, always like fight back, always push back. It's the same. It's the same playbook that works because that's what our culture rewards. And I get frustrated when this is why I always like talk about like leftist spaces stuff. It's like I don't think that leftist spaces are inherently worse, but it's like we need to understand that
we need to be hyper, we need to be aware of, we need to leave space to be critical of our own behavior and be ready to admit when we have a problem
like
that we need to fix.
Leftist spaces can reinforce white supremacy. They can reinforce anti-Semitism. They can reinforce transphobia. They can transmisogyny, Islamophobia. Like we can reinforce all of these dynamics, and it's very frustrating when you say that and people be like, "Well, leftism is against these things." I'm like, "Yes, the ideology of leftism, like whatever. I mean, there's different ones. I'm an anarchist, but like, regardless, most leftist ideologies are." Against those things. They are overtly against those things. That does not mean when we try to make structures within a society that is not leftist, is not about facilitating those structures, when we have to utilize these tools and these structures and these spaces that we are, and just the mindsets that we're living within, does not mean that we are immune from replicating those things within our spaces as well. But it's like you try to have that conversation and people will get very angry at you, especially when a lot of the problems are like institutional to a degree too. Like it's easy to point out like, oh, there's a transphobe in a leftist space. Yeah. It's like, oh, there's a transphobe in a leftist space. Like obviously, like we can point that out. But it's like there's a lot of like institutional aspects of it that people don't want to look at. I guess is the best way to put it.
The default assumption where it's like if you're not this, then you're in the other camp or whatever, and there's like so I like the thing with interviews that's so frustrating is I'm like I want to keep, but I got let the guest talk.
No, it's again conversation. It's good. I'd rather have a conversation than like me just that's the one hard thing is I'm a autistic person, so I will rant. Me too. If you let me go, I will talk for the next like 3 hours at you about something.
But this is exactly my kind of interest too, so it's like I'm happy to hear your opinions on it and everything like that. But I was just gonna say, for the purposes of not taking up all your time, and not ending up with like a 4-hour long video, but
that is all.
That'll be the extended cut. Okay, so let me look at my list. Well, we were supposed to do this at the beginning, but better late than never. Why don't you tell me about Identities? What is it? How did it start? What was the process in creating it? And what do you want to do with it next? Like the characters or the world or whatever.
Yeah.
Minor spoiler alert, but by the way, if people want to watch it, go to nebula.tv. I think you have an affiliate code too, don't you?
Yeah, it's like nebula.tv/identities, I think is the one you can use. Or nebula.tv/Jessie Gender. Both, like the way Nebula works is like they select, like when you sign up, that goes to my link and that sort of gets registered as my thing and sort of is part of the pool of people who register, whatever.
Yeah. And Nebula is not like Netflix. It's not like a huge funded thing. It's all by and for creators.
The money.
So.
What can I say? I make sure I'm not breaking NDA. Like basically, like there's a pool of money that like Nebula makes every month. Part of it goes to paying the people who actually work at Nebula, and then everything else is split up amongst creators equitably based on different factors that I can't say because NDA stuff. But like it all is split up equitably amongst all of us. So like if you sign up for Nebula, even if it's not for me, it's for someone else, like ultimately, at the end of the day, like, it all benefits all of us.
Yeah.
So,
I just want people to not assume it's like a big corporation. It's like literally a small.
yeah, it is a company, like its own, like it's a company structure, but it's not Netflix in any way, shape, or form. And it is certainly much better than Netflix in a lot of ways. But yeah, sorry, just to focus on Identities. I mean, there's a lot there. So Identities is the initial. Well, let me put it this way. So what Identities is right now is it's a short film that is a science fiction film where two people wake up in a room, a boy and a girl, completely empty room, no doors, no exits, no way out. And they have no memory of who they are, and they have to figure out how to escape. That's the selling pitch. That's the pitch of the movie, and it's
almost
a sci-fi
sounds like
film.
Saw the way you just described it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly inspired by things like Cube and Saw in certain regards,
but not violent.
Yeah, it's not violent in that way. It's much more akin to like The Matrix in terms of like stuff that it's doing, but like the setup is very like Cube or Saw in terms of like the initial pitch of it. But ultimately, what the story is about is it's meant to be a story that is from a queer perspective and a non-binary perspective, especially from my point of view. However, it is meant to try to talk about how we are all dealing with these same struggles and issues. It's a story about how identities are sold to us and how we are meant to, kind of what we were talking about earlier, like how we are set against each other of like, oh, a boy versus a girl. Like
white versus black.
White versus black, man versus woman, like left versus right. Like how we are set against each other in a binary, and how that binary is sold to us, and how artificial it is, and how we can choose to find how do we find ourselves within a society that tries to sell us our identities, sell us what we're supposed to be, sell us like this is the type of person.
Why are we limiting ourselves to like filling out an online profile where you only have these options? Humans are way more diverse than that. We do not need to limit ourselves by these defined limited number of options. So I think it did a good job of that.
And as we are seeing today, even when a culture seemingly supposedly lets you choose like different options, like getting an X marker on your passport, we can see how that can easily be pulled away and used to even target you down the line. So like that's what the movie is about. And it's a science fiction film that's sort of about that. And it initially came out of like my I wrote it initially as just a thing for myself, which was the boy version of myself and the girl version of myself as I was starting my transition in a room talking to each other.
So how long ago was that you started?
That would have been like 2014, 2015 sort of time.
So it's been cooking.
Yeah, it's been and I mean that version of it was like very bullshitty and very up its own ass sort of thing, which was like ultimately what it was like it was the boy version of me as I was at that point at the start of my transition before I started anything. And then the girl version of me that like I wanted to be and felt like I was never going to achieve. And ultimately it was a way to just them having a conversation, trying to get to this point of like, you're never going to be either of us, and that's okay. And you can be who you want to be.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale, not this.
Yeah, and it's just those binaries that we're told to be. Yeah, it's those binaries are told to be. It's like you either be the ideal woman avatar or the ideal male avatar, and I'm never going to be either of those things, and that's okay. Yeah. But like having that fight, and it was very philosophical up its own butt. And then I tried to redo it again with a friend of mine. We tried to we pitched it to a couple companies as like a short series sort of thing. When I was working at Pride Media. But then like years later, I came back to it when I was working with Dr. Erin McDonald, who is the science advisor of the Star Trek franchise, but also she's one of the smartest people that I've known. She's one of the most creative people that I know. She's not only she's the science advisor of the Star Trek franchise, not only she's an astrophysicist, she's a filmmaker and creator. She's a producer. She had her own production company. She likes making queer films. She made a queer time loop film starring Mary Chieffo. She produced it. They wrote it. Mary Chieffo, who's from Star Trek Discovery, also a really wonderful person, also a very queer creator. And we connected at a Star Trek convention, and we were like, it was one of those things where at that convention, I got the chance to meet so many of my heroes. Like I got to meet Mike McMahon, who made Lower Decks. I got to meet like Jack Quaid and like all these really cool people that are like my heroes. Like I wanted to work on, like my goal in life is I want to work on Star Trek. I love Star Trek to death. It's the thing I want to do. And I got to be in the room with all the people that made that. Like I got invited to a party and I was there and I sat there and I was thinking about that guy actually, who was like, I want to be famous. And I'm like, I'm here. I'm in the room with all these people. What do I want?
I was gonna say, do you still want to work on Star Trek?
I mean, I still do. Yes, that's a whole other conversation for another day. We can get into that if we want to, but because I'll rant about Star Trek for forever. But like but I was in the room and I'm sort of like, what do I want from these people? And I realized nothing. What am I gonna do? Like, ask for a job or whatever? It's like the things I have to do is I have to make what I want and like it and make the things that I'm called to make and do that, and that will land me on Star Trek or not. But at the end of the day, I'm following what I want to make. And I had that conversation with Dr. Aaron, who is very much also of the same mind of like, don't try to work with your heroes, work with the people on the same level as you, people who are also trying to make cool things. Like, you could chase all day trying to work with all these people, but you want to just make people, you want to work with people. So we decided to work on something, and I was like, all right, I was a producer on the Every Morning film, the film I just mentioned, the time loop film. Then I was like, let's work on Identities together. And we built up that. We were going to do a Kickstarter, but then the day we were going to do the Kickstarter, Nebula told us, hey, like it was like 2 or 3 days before we were going to launch the Kickstarter. Nebula's like, hey, we'll fund it. Nice. So I'm like, all right, could have told us weeks earlier so we didn't have to do all this work. But it was very cool. And Nebula funded it. We made it, and it came out to be what it is. And like, it was such a cool learning process because I did get to work with some of my heroes. Like, I got to work with John Delancey, who came in on the project, and he was absolutely amazing. Like, one of the kindest, sweetest people I've worked with. Like, not that I expected him to be a bigot, but he's an older guy, and it was a very clear set. Like,
you always have that like waiting for the other shoe to drop thing.
Yeah,
especially with Neil Gaiman and all this other stuff, and it's like, well,
yeah. And so like, it was a very queer. Like, most of the cast was trans and queer in some way. Most of the crew is queer and trans in some way.
And I'm assuming that they all put a little piece of themselves in too, as far as the experience.
Oh yeah. Well, that's something I'll talk about too. But like with John Delancey, he was just like, he came on the set, got everyone's pronouns right, was super amazing the entire time. Like, he was fantastic.
He was a good ally.
He gave so much of himself. Yeah, and he gave so much of himself too. Like, we had to do voiceover and stuff, and he came in. He was just like, I'll come in whenever. And I was like, you don't need to. Like, if you can't do it, like, we'll figure it out. Like, I understand you're busy. He's like, no, I'll come in. Like, he was fantastic.
Can I ask where you filmed it? Like, what state?
So we filmed in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
We filmed in LA. Yeah.
So you flew Philosophy Tube all the way into.
Oh yeah, so that was interesting thing with it. So yeah, Abigail Thorne's in it too. And Maggie Mae Fish is in it. Jessica Nicole, who many people know from Fringe, is in it. Ezra Reeves, who's fantastic, an amazing non-binary creator who does like a lot of plays and stuff in San Francisco, a lot of queer stuff and advocacy there. A bunch of amazing. James Tyson, who's a great comedian. Cast is it's a stacked cast. Anyways, I can go on all day about all of them. Why am I blanking?
We were talking about how you were in the room and you realized that you wanted to make your own stuff. And
well, no, you're talking about Abigail Thorne. Quick story about that. I could go on about this for forever.
Sorry.
So we had two. So we were originally planning on shooting. I think I forget exactly what it was going to be, but it was like right at the start of the actor strike. And so it was sort of like we were allowed to film because like we were like low enough budget. We weren't being made by a major studio or anything that like, so like we weren't being struck or anything, but it was a bureaucratic nightmare. And I've made a video on my issues with how SAG handled the situation. But regardless, at the time that we were originally going to film, Abigail was not going to be able to be on set because she was filming House of the Dragon at that time. So it's just very funny. It's like, oh, I know she's in House of the Dragon. I can't say that yet, but like I knew she was going to be on it because I'm like, I understand why you can't be on set. We'll figure it out. We'll green screen you or whatever. Because she's like, she plays an AI character, so it would have been like fine for her to be green screened. But then part of like the stuff with SAG, we did have to move our film date, and so she was able to come. So that was a very funny thing. So we did.
So it sucked for her, but worked out for you.
I mean, honestly, it didn't suck for her. She got 2 days. That worked out for her too, because then she got to be on both sets, and she got to have multiple days of work, and she got to come to the States. So I think she appreciated it as well.
Yeah. I didn't mean it in like a extreme way. I was trying to be funny.
No, I know what you meant. I know what you meant. But yeah, no. So it was but yeah, like just I could keep going on about it. Like the two things that I'll say about Identities is what was the coolest learning part of the process for me was, this is my first project directing something of this size. And it was like something that I wrote and it was like my vision TM. And, and I've talked about this in other videos and things like that. It's like we live in a culture that venerates auteurs and saying it's like it's my work or whatever, the director's work. But what ultimately I learned is that when you're making a film, at a certain point, you get to a place where like you've hired all these people to work in different departments. You know, you're casting actors, you're casting an art department, you're people who are building your set. And at a certain point, you realize, like, I've explained what this is going to be. I explained what we're trying to say with this to these people. Now it's my job to facilitate these artists. And I had that moment where, like, I jumped into a Zoom call, and it was the first Zoom call with everyone that was working on the project, and I saw all these people like looking to me to guide them. And it's like, these are all amazing artists, and I want to uplift them to be their best selves. And it was such a cool process because, like, there's things I screwed up and things that I messed up, the things that I wish could be better on it from some writing stuff or ways I could enable people better. But ultimately,
well, it's always different between when you're making it and then you watch it and you're just like, oh, I wish I had done that differently.
I know. And so it's like I just wanted to. And so, but it was such a cool experience because everyone was so lovely and everyone's so amazing and everyone was just so fantastic. And you so rarely get to feel that like sense of like community on a project like that. And it's just like, it's a small version of everything that I kind of want for the world, right? It's like we're all people in shared interest trying to make something beautiful that we care about each other making and care about making together. Like it was just I'm so proud of it for that.
Well, you were talking about how isolated online creators are, and something like this is a unique opportunity to actually be in the same room with other people who have same interests as you, and you know, who you care about similar things with each other. And like, I'm sure it's amazing. Like VidCon, I'm not famous, so I don't know what it's like in the fancy parties. But from what I hear, one of the reasons that creators who go to stuff like VidCon appreciate it so much is you're able to actually see and talk to in a human way. And I mean, like, I'm having a great time talking to you in a video chat, but it's just, if you were physically here, it'd be different, you know? And so.
Yeah, no, I mean, like it's funny because like I went to VidCon last year. I bought a ticket.
I was
never
there
went to
too.
VidCon. I never went into the thing because there's like Nebula does like they get like rent a house for people to like come and stay at. Like if they like are coming out of town, they can stay there. But also you can just come and hang out. And I just did the whole time. I just went there and hung out. And I was just like, I just want to hang out with people.
That's
and
the dream.
Talk to them and see how
Honestly, that's the dream. Like the only reason I go to VidCon is just because it's the closest I can come to seeing other creators. But it's also fun, you know, just being around other people like on my level and just being like, I love video editing. I love making videos. Yeah, let's all talk about how much we love.
That's what people like. That's what we want. It's the sad thing about YouTube. Too is like we have been asked to be every part of the process. Like we are like on camera talent, we are the writers, we are the editors, and like there's a lot of like empowering, there's a lot of things that you're empowered to do because of that. But like there's a certain level of you're empowered through that, right? Of like, okay, I have my hands in every part of the process. But there's also just an isolation there of like you're not getting to work with people and build up with people as a result. And like part of cool art is the collaborative process and getting to work with other people and make with other people. So it's kind of one of those sadder things about YouTube in that like there's benefits and trade-offs, but like as someone who, you know, I went to film school, I grew up wanting that, wanting to make things with people, and my favorite part of the process of making a film is working with actors. I love working with actors to death, and it's like you don't really get that on YouTube, and it's kind of there's a sadness
unless you have a lot of money, and then you know.
But I mean, like 90% of people aren't getting that. But yeah, so I mean, like that's the kind of whole frustration with it.
Yeah.
The only other thing I do want to mention, because you asked, and allow me this because I'm trying to get this out there as much as possible.
No, I'm sorry for distracting you.
No. This is your interview. It's fine. I just want to say it because I'm trying to get it out there. There is more that I want to do with Identities.
I was literally going to say, like, what's next for Identities? So.
Well, I mean, right now, so just to, like, how best to put this? I'm trying not to spoil stuff. Like one of the things we wanted to do before
Expanded
Identities came,
universe, like 20.
Well,
20
continue
movies?
the story. If you've watched the film, it has an ending,
Mm-hmm.
but the ending is very much like the goal of the ending of the film that I wanted to have. And there's even an after credit sequence, but the goal that I wanted to have is just like, oh, this is the beginning of the story. And I want people to be spurned to action at the end of it. Like the point of it at the end is like the characters finally come to realize like, oh, I can fight back, or I can do more than just be like, I can break the system.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And so, like, if this is all I get to tell with the story, like the ending point is I want to spurn people to be like, oh, you can do that too. And that's sort of the note to end on. But a lot of people like commented, and this was the intention. It was meant to be kind of a pseudo pilot, is to make it a TV series to continue the story forward, because there's so much more to tell.
Yeah, I know. When it ended, I was like, no, I want to know what happens next.
I know. And there's so much. And I hate to be like the ooh mystery person, but there's so much.
No, it's good. It means you have stuff already planned ahead. You're not going to be like spitballing it, you know, like.
Yeah, no, I have but without spoiling too much, like there are like I have a whole 3-season plan for the show planned out. Like I have a whole Bible written. I like know where it's going to go, and there are a lot of clues in Identities, like what's been made so far for future stuff.
Yeah. I'm excited for the world building. I want to know more about that company and how it came to be, and the middle management and all that stuff.
To tease some stuff too, we did so originally there was a possible plan. It didn't work out because just time and stuff, but I wrote a audio drama that was going to be a prequel about the Anthony character.
Yeah, he was fun.
Played by Jackie. Yeah, played by Jackie Cox. He's actually my favorite. Like his backstory is one of my favorites. Actually, like breaks my heart. Like the stuff that happens with his character breaks my heart.
Ooh, trauma.
But like yeah, lots of fun trauma. So I wrote a whole backstory for him, and we were gonna do it as an audio drama. Didn't work out, but there is a scene that we have with John Delancey that we did record. And so we used that there was like an ARG game that we did around Identities that you can if you look at like in the first trailer, we had a link to like the company website that you can go and find, and the stuff you can find, and you can find audio recordings of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And there's a lot of clues to a lot of the like larger world.
So what you're saying is we need to get Film Theory to do an episode about Identities. Mm-hmm. You heard it.
I would love that. But yeah, I do want to, because the goal with the series would be spoilers for people. Apologies, I'm just like I haven't had a chance to talk about all this, so I appreciate you indulging me.
Like I said, if you decide, I shouldn't have shared that, just let me know and I'll cut it.
No, it's all good. I don't mind. The goal with the series ultimately would be like spoilers for the movie, but the ultimate reveal is this all takes place on a metaverse world, where like the man who runs the company, John Delancey's character, Steve, he is sort of like an Elon Musk kind of figure. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg kind of figure.
Well, I hate him already, so.
Yeah, no, he's not great. Who has made this metaverse that everyone works on and lives on. And
well, like you said, Matrix was one of the inspirations.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
But like his world is these white rooms with white walls, and he can make anything he wants, and yet he makes these very corporate spaces and limited mindsets.
Why does that make me think of YouTube?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And I wanna explore like the show is about being like a non-binary perspective and a queer perspective, but ultimately what I wanted to more explore is like what can we make when we have this place that we could literally build anything that we want to. You can make the metaverse anything that we want it to be. We can literally make galaxies and universes, whatever, and yet we just make these most limited things imaginable, be they our identities or the places that we inhabit.
And it's like when Meta was advertising the metaverse or Horizon Worlds or whatever, he built a boardroom.
Exactly.
A boardroom.
That was like a big inspiration for it. It's like we just like you could do anything, you just build boardrooms.
Yeah.
And I want the series to explore like what happens when you start having people able to break the system and able to make their own worlds and build their own worlds. And what is that going to do? How are we going back to the ideas that we talked about before, how are we going to harm each other when doing that too? Because like some people will like accidentally hurt other people when they do that. And like how do we fight back and build solidarity and build movements together while also enabling each other to like build these beautiful worlds in that we like. What happens when you can take what's inside of you and make it literal in the world around you and literalize who you are inside? in the world around you. And that's
so
a very trans theme.
It's an uplifting story.
Yes,
like.
it is a very that's ultimately what I want it to be. And I have some, like I said, I have a story that I want to go for 3 seasons on it, and I want to explore that sort of stuff. I want to explore some cool cyberpunky stuff about like identity versus, because like questions that like to put out some questions from the movie, like this is all a metaverse. Who are they in the real world? Why can't these characters remember who they are? Are you able to leave the metaverse? Like what is the real world look like?
Is it one person split in 2? Is it 2 different people?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Like why does our main character seem to be different and have different abilities? Like there's an answer to that question of like, we don't explore it in the movie too much, but like there is an answer to the question of like why this character specifically is able to break the rules versus everyone else who has not been able to.
Yeah, like that's what I would love to see, because it's like they broke the wall, but how, and how do they help others do the same?
Mm-hmm. So like that is part of it, and like part of it's like to give hints, like part of it's privilege. Like there's a reason, for example, this is something that's in the film without spoiling too much. Like there's a character played by Jessica Nicole, who is she's a Black woman, and her character is like also middle manager type, but you can tell that she's like lower on the totem pole. She's like an HR manager, and she's very clearly like done with this. She doesn't give a shit. Like she doesn't like want to be there. She doesn't care. And then when the characters break the system and they are like outside the confines of the corporate world that they are told to be in, they find her again, and she has a completely different look.
Yeah.
And it's a much
definitely
more
not corporate sanitized look.
No, much more assertive. And she says the line like, I learned how to switch my code long ago, mm-hmm. which is a very clear allusion to code switching. Mm-hmm. And like she is a character that I'm very excited to explore more of, because it's like our characters are like 2 white characters.
Yeah.
Like, and there's
I actually did. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I mean that was going to be one of my things that I wouldn't say it's a critique so much, but I wondered mm-hmm. why. And so mm-hmm. it's interesting to hear that there's something going on behind that, because we were talking about marginalized people like infighting and everything like that. Mm-hmm. How do you talk about, for instance, a trans experience without it only being limited to your and my experience as white people? Like, how do you include mm-hmm. racial or ableism or whatever without talking over the person, and also without having it be a 5-hour long movie? So
yep, exactly. I mean, that's why I would want it to be a TV series. And like, if I did, like, I have things that I want to explore with that character, but obviously if I did it as a show, bring in people of color at the writer's room and things like that to explore that. But like, that's the intention there, is like, I think they, without spoiling too much, Michelle is the character's name, Jessica's character. She would be a character who would at times be antagonistic to our main characters, but I think she is the character who would ultimately be right most of the time. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that she's antagonistic does not mean that she's wrong. And I think that will come down a lot to, like, again, without spoiling the backstory of these characters, the privilege that these characters have, both in terms of like being white presenting, as well as different stuff with their backstory that will enable them to have more powers than others.
I mean,
so,
the way
it's definitely something I want to explore.
The way you counteract the first step in counteracting your privilege is to recognize you even have it. So mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. sometimes you need so, like, not a Neo. Oh my gosh, what's the Lawrence Fishburne's character? Morpheus.
Morpheus.
Yeah, sometimes you need a Morpheus mm-hmm. to be like, hey, wake up, notice this thing. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, that's cool.
So and wanting her, the other thing with it too is not wanting her to be a tool for like teaching our main characters. Like, right? Like, you don't want her
the magical black whatever.
Yeah. And you want, like, that's what I would want to like explore with the show, and to bring in other writers and other voices into a series, which would be like not have her be like, certainly be antagonistic to our main characters, but not be a character who is there to teach our main characters and have her own story arcs and own things that she's going for.
A fully fleshed character, fully fleshed out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, she's fascinating. I mean, you want to know how mm-hmm. she got from where the corporate side to her authentic self. Like, that's a whole story right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
mm-hmm.
cool.
So like, there's a lot that I want to do with the show. We'll see if I get to make it. I mean, I'm trying to pitch it right now to places.
I was going to say, what can we do to help you make it a reality?
The best thing I can tell people is just like share it around, be vocal about it. If you do know anybody who will take pictures, let me know. But otherwise, like share it around, be vocal about it.
Write reviews of it, do YouTube videos about it, you know?
Yeah, just as much as you can, share it around.
Film theory.
The more I
paging film theory.
the more I can get people attention. I have there are some plans. I'm trying to see if I can pitch it in different ways. But we'll see how it all shakes out. But the more people I can point to saying like, hey, look at these people talking about it, the easier that'll be.
Yeah. All right. So you guys got your assignment. Sign up for Nebula, watch Identities, share it with your friends, make a review or just mention it, get the word out there so that we can achieve Jessie's dreams of making it a 3-season with 3 spin-off shows and a book and a comic series. And a fully fledged ARG.
Yes. That's one thing with it. I want it to be 3 seasons and done. I always am a proponent of like stories have endings. Like we could do you do like side stories and stuff, but I'm always someone's like I hate stories that never end.
Yeah.
Like stories should have endings and not be stretched out or like elongated or
15 seasons long.
yeah.
Well, that is the exciting thing about like comic books and stuff like that is it's an opportunity to really expand upon, again, like the world or a side character or something without like interrupting the flow of the actual show.
That's would be the hope. Because there are others, like I said, we had a backstory for Anthony's character. That would be part of the main story, to be frank, but it would but there are places you could explore. And I think there's a lot you could do with Identities. It's just a concept too, to really play with it. So
well, for the sake of being on brand with my content, which is, of course, the whole point for anyone who's never watched any of my videos, why I do these videos topless is so that I can try to normalize the sight of female nipples outside of sexually explicit situations so that maybe someday we can have the exact same right as people who look male. And so it's not just oh my God, look at my tits, blah, blah, blah. It's literally if people only ever see female nipples in a sexual situation, then
they're always going to associate it.
Yeah, catch-22. But unfortunately, because female nipples are considered sexually explicit, I can only post them on my own website or on porn sites, and I don't want to use a porn site. So anyway, so what are your opinions as far as, first of all, where exactly would you draw the line between nudity and sex? And also, like, has your opinion changed? Has your opinion on that changed, especially as you've gone through transition yourself?
I mean, yes to all of those things. Definitely my opinion has changed. I mean, as like someone grown up, like told to see myself as a boy and seen as a boy, like I was sort of seeing, I initially thought of like any appearance of a woman's nudity as sexy, right? Like it was always sort of seen that way. And then as transitioning sort of happened, it's actually, to give like an example that was like a very initial thing for me that was kind of like shocking was when I first started transitioning. It was like I was just out in college and I was with some college friends. Content warning for like what I like consider like some sort of sexual harassment. But like I was out with friends and I would wear like just with some friends I would wear like a dress or like breasts, but like fake like fit breast forms or whatever, just to like explore that and present as a woman and things like that. And it was very like an early baby trans egg sort of thing where it's like I would wear like way too much makeup. The dress would be way like I don't even wear that many dresses today. Even though I'm out in transition, like I'm not a huge dress person. I'll wear dresses, but I'm not a huge dress person. But then it was like very, very floral, like very over the top. It's like a thing that a lot of trans women do, and we transitions like we go over the top in the other direction to like try to prove our femininity to ourselves.
So literally, I was gonna jump in earlier, but then when the conversation moved on, ContraPoints had a thing in one of her videos really early on that really, really stuck with me, and I can't remember the exact quote, but basically it was, do you think I'm putting on all this feminine stuff because I love it? No, it's because I'm trying to indicate to the world that I identify as a woman. I want you to use she, her. And that really, I thought, kind of helped me realize, because I know what it's like to be misgendered as far as I used to wear baggy clothes a lot as a teenager. And if anyone ever said he, I was like, yeah. So it's like, I completely understand that feeling of being misgendered. But I have the privilege that, like, even if I just go out wearing jeans and no makeup and everything like that, because I have breasts, because I have long hair, although not always, my sons and my husband also have long hair, because I have a feminine face, the chances of people saying he are very minimal. Whereas for a
Mm-hmm.
trans woman,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have like wide shoulders or a deep voice or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you have to go the extra mile and be super duper awesome feminine to
Yep.
not be misgendered. So,
Yeah, and like institutions, like there's many stories about like trans women trying to transition, and like gatekeepers, like medical gatekeepers, would be like, "Why aren't you coming to our sessions in a dress? Like only women, like women wear dresses. Don't you want to wear a dress?" And like being forced
geez.
to like hyper feminize to do that. And even now, like for example, like when I'm traveling, I'm gonna have to be traveling outside the country in a few weeks, which is scary because of the passport stuff going on with trans people. And it's sort of like, well, I'm gonna have to dress hyper femme just for travel, just so I can like try to pass as the f on my passport, so I won't get harassed by whatever passport officer that may want to be a dick that day.
Yeah.
um but regardless, like yeah, going to like your point too, we
Well, you're
were
talking
like
about being at college and what
yeah,
happened
yeah,
there.
so I like was wearing the dresses and everything, and I had fake breasts, and I came back from like, we went out to a party, and I came back, and a friend of mine was drunk. And he like, when he came in, instantly put his hands on my breast forms and squeezed.
Wow.
And like they weren't like real breasts.
Yeah.
And I never really spoke up about it, but it really bothered me because it like was this like ownership over my body, invalidating me as a woman
Yeah.
too, of being like, these are fake, right? And like uh and it just like was just a violation of my
Yeah.
space, but I didn't know how to articulate that because it's like they were fake, and
Yeah.
like they were breast forms, but it still like felt like an invalidation and a violation of me.
Yeah.
And so it's like
Well, it's like
you
the
know.
touching the waist thing, where it's like, oh, he was
Mhm.
just touching her waist to get by. It's like, would you have done that if it was a dude? No. Then it's
Mhm.
gendered. Don't make excuses for
Mhm.
yourself. So,
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean like yeah, I have like I forget exactly the question. There was something I was
well,
talking about, like
basically, how
like
your position has changed on what's considered sexual and
yeah.
especially as breasts
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, like that was sort of part of that journey of figuring that out, and like I could have intellectualized a lot of this stuff at like the time in college and told you it, but like there's also a difference between when you're transitioning and you start to be like, oh, I'm developing breasts and on hormones and things like that, of being like, oh, the world now sees my body as a sexual object
And
when
as the
I just
most
see it as my
important
body.
thing about you as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and I, so like, it's just an interesting thing when you're transitioning. It's like, I know women, cis women who grow up being seen as like women, like will learn this as well as their bodies develop. But as like a trans person who is like, you grew up in one mindset and then have to like learn another mindset about how people are going to view your body as object externally. It's a just a very fascinating journey of being like, oh, how I'm being now fetishized or
Yeah.
objectified by culture. Like, I've had dudes stop me and tell me like I'm really hot just because I'm trans, not because I'm because I'm a
Yeah.
trans woman, yes,
Yeah.
but like the trans part is what they're fetishizing of it, and it's interesting. So
Yeah. One of the first trans women I ever knew, and at the time she was kind of at the state where she was like, I'm not trans, I just like dressing girly, but then later on she's like,
mhm.
no, I'm actually trans. She had a girlfriend
Yep.
who was constantly like, oh, you should wear a dress, oh, you should do this, you should do this, to the point where she was uncomfortable. And at the time, I didn't really understand, but now I get it. It's like, it's the tokenization. It's the, I don't see you as a person. I see
Mhm.
you as a fetish, fulfilling a fetish.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing as like, I did an interview with a disabled sex worker who is in a wheelchair and she does online videos, and she used to kind of lean into it because it's like a genre or whatever. But she really got turned off by it because there's people out there that fetishize disabled people, and like they'll take a picture of a person in a wheelchair at the beach and be like, oh, they're so hot.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of frustrating where it's like you just want to dress for yourself, you just want to present as what makes you happy, but at the same time it's like people pressuring you to do that makes you be like, no, I don't want to do what you want to do. So I run into
Yeah.
that with like, I used to be a lot more okay with talking about nudism specifically, full body nudity, but I really started to reject it because I had so many predominantly cis men who just did not care about this part at all. They purely just wanted to be like full body nudity, and I got irritated because they weren't respecting me. They weren't respecting
Yeah.
my mission. They were using me as a figurehead. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Sorry.
No,
Get on my soapbox.
No, I mean, it's interesting too because like there's an element of too like, and this is something to talk about. It's like it's not inherently a bad thing to be objectified. It's just like understanding of like the like how women are only seen as objects, and understanding that we should create a culture where like, you know, I enjoy being seen as sexy. I enjoy having a partner or even other people be like, you're hot looking and finding me attractive, or even finding me sexually attractive, like at certain points. Like, I don't inherently think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just when you're only seen as an object, that's all you're allowed to be. You're static in that. And like,
and when people insist on sharing their opinion with you, no matter how you say, I don't want you to tell me that you find me, that you like my tits, I still have guys that are just like, I like what you have to say. Also, great tits. And it's like, you're not listening to what I'm saying if you're going to say that. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing. I've done like videos where I've been in like sexy outfits. Like in my Sex and Star Trek videos, I'm in like sexy outfits. And it's like, I know like that's going to get some attention. But then I would get emails being like, hey, the weirdest one I ever got was a person emailing me being like, can I have consent from you to masturbate to you?
How nice of them to ask.
Yeah. And I'm like, I guess that's so much there, because it's like, I don't care if you masturbate.
Just keep it to
me.
yourself.
Like, keep it to yourself. Like, do whatever you want with an image of me, as long as you keep it to yourself. But it's also sort of like there's a weird kindness in trying to ask my consent to masturbate, and it's like, is that like part of the kink? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's weird. It's this weird like navigation that I especially like sometimes cis men too try to can't figure out of like, oh, I want to like be the good guy and like ask for consent. But it's like you don't need, it's creepier to ask in that situation. You know what I mean?
I think that's honestly part of the feminine experience, in that there's this attitude that a lot of men have, and they don't even recognize it, of the best compliment you can do for a woman is let her know that you find her fuckable. And like, yeah, well, you know, she doesn't like it when other people comment on her breasts, but I also said that I like her videos, therefore me saying she has nice breasts is a good thing. And I do think that, you know, it's definitely happens to women a lot more. Like, I can only say, as a person who's lived my life as a woman, I feel like men are not nearly as often the recipient of people going out of their way to be like, you're hot, you're hot, you're hot, you know.
One of the things that I noticed, and now that someone told it to me, I cannot unsee it, and I notice it all the time now, is that take notice of how people compliment, and I catch myself doing it, men and women. When a person walks into a room and sees a man seeing a man, the thing that they will compliment will often be what they are doing. And if they compliment a woman, it'll be how they look. Especially, and it starts as like with kids too. Like the reason I started noticing it was a parent being like, I have a son and a daughter. I was another content creator, who I won't name because they don't talk about their kids in their videos. But like he mentioned, like, I just notice it all the time now. It's like people will come in and talk to my son and be like, compliment what he's doing, and then they'll look at my daughter and compliment how she looks. Yeah, every single time.
Well, what's funny is my kids are both male, although the 8-year-old, he says he's non-binary and he doesn't care about gender, or he doesn't care about pronouns and everything like that. He's still figuring it out. But both of them have long hair, and people constantly think that they're girls. And yeah, like they will literally be like, "Oh, you're so pretty," and like they'll be wearing like jeans and a t-shirt. And yet people are like, "You're so pretty," and it's like they wouldn't say that if they identified them as male. Like, it's strange to me.
Yeah, so. It's just seeing is like it's acknowledging boys have agency and girls are just objects to be acknowledged as not just surface level and not looking in. And it's something that constantly happens with trans people too. I mean, you're looking at like stuff like Amelia Perez. That's a you know, an interesting, just to get into stuff that I talk about, just to use it as a quick example, like, you know, I look at like Amelia Perez, which is the big trans movie that everyone's praising nowadays outside of the Carlos Sophia.
Everyone who's not a leftist YouTuber anyway.
Yeah. And then you get something like I Saw the TV Glow, which
Mm-hmm.
is another movie by a trans creator that is such a good film about like an internalized what it feels like to be trans, in a way that connects what it feels like to be trans to everyone. Like that movie is basically saying everyone feels this way in some way, shape, or form. We all feel like we're put into a box by society.
Yeah.
But it is also a universally transparent. It's getting to that internal sense of a
Yeah.
transparency. But no one really celebrates that movie in an institutional way.
Yeah.
It's all about celebrating Amelia Perez, which is a external view of trans people, of
I
like
was
how do
literally
we
thinking
view
that
trans
because
people.
like the Glow is a lot more about the mentality of being
Mm-hmm.
trans, and Amelia is more like how other people see a trans person. Like Amelia is not
Mm-hmm.
even though her name is on the movie, like from I haven't watched it. I've watched your videos and I watched a couple other videos talk about it, so this is me going off
Mm-hmm.
the opinions of others, but it seems like she's barely even the main character. Like
No,
the
she's not. Yeah.
lawyer is the main character. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
tokenizing, let's all look at this trans person, like look at him like a zoo animal,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a big
Yeah, like
difference.
a third one you'd even toss in there is there was a movie a few years ago that was another foreign film that won an Oscar called A Fantastic Woman, which was also a movie like starred a trans woman but written and filmed by a cis man, but it was much better. It was a much better movie. I think it actually like it was it was everything in that movie felt truthful. Let me put it that way. Like Amelia Perez is like every single like the guy just wrote what he thought a trans person
Yeah.
was, and like as a result did every transphobic
And what
trope.
he thought a Mexican person was like.
Yeah, that too. But a Fantastic Woman, I think, is I have criticism of that movie, but it is a much more truthful version of like, oh, okay, this is like, there's nothing in here that's like incorrect about what a trans person experiences. However, it's still externalizing. Like we never get a real sense of her internal feelings in that movie either. And like you can also see how like tokenizing it is by just the title. Like she's a fantastic woman, but if you watch the movie, she's just dealing with stuff that trans people deal with every day. So it's like what makes her fantastic? Just being trans.
It's like girl bossification.
Yeah, so it's like it's still like there's still that like external view of trans people. So like A Fantastic Woman is a better movie. It's not doesn't offend me, but it's still viewing trans people as object to be venerated, object to be adored. Like women are put on a pedestal generally, whether they're cis or trans, but like still viewing us as an external object rather than getting in our internal viewpoint. That's something like I Saw the TV Glow gets at.
So what we got to do is we got to find a way to combine the internalized exploration of trans identity from Glow with the externalized that people who are not trans, like, okay, so this is what they look like and this is what they feel, or what a lot of trans people feel. So well, and then stuff like your video your video series and stuff would be an awesome yes, there's a visual representation of trans and non-binary and everything, but you're also getting to hear the person's thoughts a lot more and vocalized or whatever. So basically we need more trans directors and actors and stuff.
I mean, that's the thing I would do with Identities, right? Like the point of the Identities, if you make it into a show, is to say every single character feels this way. Because like the only non-binary character will be our main character, and every other character will be dealing with other stuff. Some of it related to gender, some not, but none of them I believe would be trans necessarily in the same way we think of trans. But everyone is going to be still dealing with those same internal struggles of how their identity has been confined and defined for them by the dictates of the man in charge.
Because I mean, even trans is a category, like you were talking about in your biological male video, which I also just watched this morning. So.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so like that would be the point of something like Identities, because like as a show, it would be about exploring how the internal, because like I look at Identities and like it has its own unique flavors and stuff, but a lot of what it's saying is stuff that like The Matrix said, I Saw the TV Glow said, like they're very similar messages if you look at like the core of them, and like the structures and like the flavor of like the sci-fi setting will shift, but like the core idea of like we're trying to be ourselves in a system that tries to define who we are is the same across all of our works.
And but what's new about Identities too is it's making it less allegorical and more like
literal.
Yeah, literal.
And I think there's an opportunity with it to be able to like expand it out to be like, let's talk about other identities in there. Because like The Matrix kind of tried to touch on it. Like there's elements of that in,
but it got swept up in the action and the sci-fi, and so most people didn't
and also
even see that. So
and also the heady philosophy and like. And like, you know, I love philosophy. Philosophy tube's great. I love it. But like, what's a way to like literalize a lot of this stuff? And I think that Identities could have the opportunity to do that. So that not to sell it again, but like I think that's I think that's the message that I try to get across to people just generally in my work. Like, when I talk about trans issues, like, yes, these are what trans people feel, but our feelings are human feelings. You feel like everyone feels the same way in a lot of senses. You just may not feel it through your gender, or you may not feel it in the same way through your gender.
Yeah.
But we all sort of feel like we are told by our society that boxes us up and tries to sell us who we are, and that we want to be ourselves despite what society tells us to be.
Yeah. It's that whole quote that we have way more in common than we have apart. We just have to not let ourselves be distracted and pigeonholed and, weaponize our differences, because why? Like you said, if you've got the freedom to imagine anything, why pick from a drop down of you can only be X, Y, or Z? So, all right. Well, I know that it has been 2 hours. I'm sure your voice needs a break. And my kids are going to be home from school soon, so that's going to be chaotic. So, thank you very, 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 very much. I am sorry that I did a terrible job of actually sticking to the question.
Shush, this is great. I was about to say I had a really great conversation. You don't need to apologize. This was fantastic. So
well, that's kind of my goal. Is I figure, if you just want to be asked a bunch of questions or whatever, like, there's other interviewers out there. I like to get to know the person, and I like to hopefully give you a not platform, but like give you an in to talk about what you want to talk about. So you don't have to be like limited, like with a video essay, you have like a main focus of that video essay, but something like this, if the conversation goes over there, great. If it goes over here, great. So the problem is that you're really easy to talk to. So I'm just like, I want to keep talking, but, so how can people, find you? What videos of yours, obviously Identities, people should definitely check that out. What other content of yours do you think that people should check out? I mean, before they watch everything, because obviously they're going to go watch everything. What should they start with? And what are the best places to find you?
Yeah, big thing. My YouTube channel is called Jessie Gender. So check me out there. That's where I did the video essay style stuff.
And also Jessie Gender After Dark for your.
Yeah, so yeah. Jessie Gender is where I did the big video stuff, where I think Amelia Perez, the big video, is like one of my more recent ones that people should check out. Jessie Gender After Dark, as you mentioned, is a secondary channel. I do sort of more off the cuff, unscripted things, reviews of TV shows, stuff like
that.
Which
I also like, because it's more like it's like watching the movie versus the like after the movie. I don't even know
yeah.
Specials.
Yeah, I always feel bad because like whenever I do that, it's like I talk so fast. I'm like, calm down, Jessie.
I have no idea what are you talking about. What are you talking about? I'm not like that at all.
Welcome to my neurodiverse brain. Anyways, and then other things. Patreon pays the bills. I'm on Nebula, obviously, as we've been talking about. Identities is there, and then the only other thing is I have a podcast called Right now, it's still called the Jumpgate Podcast, which was a Babylon 5 rewatch podcast. Literally in 2 weeks, we just finished Babylon 5. We're jumping over to watching the reimagined Battlestar Galactica with my co-host Vera Wild of Council of Geeks. So if you are a big fan of Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined show, we are about to start a brand new podcast rewatching that show. And Vera's never seen it. I've seen it. She has not. So it's a fun, first time, new time.
And when you talk about it in your podcast, do you also relate it to your own life at all or anything? Or is it purely just about the show?
Oh, no, we obviously, we talk, it depends. We'll talk about our own stuff. It depends on what the episode's saying, what the episode's doing. But we'll talk about it through we're two, gender fluid trans folks talking about a TV show. So obviously we talk about it. We get into, both Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica are super political shows as well. So we talk about that. But we talk about sex, gender, politics, all that stuff through those, through the shows.
So even if I've never watched a show, it might still be, entertaining.
Yeah. I think it gets kind of we're very weird. We're both
the best people are.
Yeah, we both end up hitting on each other. We have a weird dynamic on it. Hopefully people seem to enjoy it and people seem to find it fun. So
it's called what you said, the Jumpgate.
The Jumpgate right now. Okay. As of by the end of January, it will switch over to the Frack This podcast.
Not Frell This, like Farscape.
Well, we did What the Frell. That was our first version.
Oh, you did do a Farscape one?
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna look that one up. Farscape's my jam.
That was our first one. We did What the Frell. We watched all of Farscape. I was my first time watching it. Her first time. Yeah. I love her so much. I love all of them. They're all fantastic. And then we did. Then we went over to the Jumpgate podcast, and then in the middle of the Jumpgate podcast, the SAG strike happened. So one of the things that they asked was not for people to not cover like productions that would fall under like union stuff. So we jumped over to doing The Prisoner, which is the British show that's fantastic, and everyone should watch it. I adore The Prisoner to death.
What is it
so
about?
We did a Prisoner podcast. Oh, how to describe?
Okay, what genre is it? Let's say that.
How to describe the genre of The Prisoner? Basic idea of it is and it has very trans vibes too. A secret agent working for the British government quits his job mysteriously, does not give a reason. He gets kidnapped by this mysterious group and put into this village. Where he's forced to live and only given the number 16. Number 6, excuse me, not 16, number 6. And they are basically trying to get information out of him about why he quit his job. And so every episode is them doing a different type of manipulation tactic to try to get this out of him. But the show is also very surreal. It's a very surreal show. It's a very weird show. And it's a show about like power and how power works and how power tries to force you to identify a certain, like, he's like, his name is number 6. He does not get a name.
Now you got my interest. I love surreal. You're making me think of Legion.
Yeah. Oh God, Legion I adore too. Yeah. If you like stuff like Legion, The Prisoner is like an early version of that, and it's like it's referenced in everything, like Matrix references,
Nice.
everything. Like
I will definitely
it is
check
like
it
it has very similar vibes. It is a show about like a character trying to find their assert their identity in a society that will not let them.
And see, I never heard of it, and now you got me all excited to go watch it. So perfect.
Yeah.
So to recap,
there's a podcast for you.
So to recap, you have your YouTube, which is your main presence, and then you also are on Nebula, and the same videos that are on YouTube are on Nebula, but you don't have to censor yourself in ridiculous ways.
Exactly.
Like Jacob
and there's
Geller.
some extra stuff on Nebula as well.
Yeah. And some more money gets to the creators. I was going to say Jacob Geller's another video essayist I really like. And yeah, he's on Nebula, and like his videos all the time, the stuff he talks about, he has to like be so careful on YouTube. So even if it's not the financial helping out the creators part of Nebula, just not having to deal with so much hoop jumping is I think reason enough. And yeah, Patreon is I assume your main way of paying the rent and everything. So check out the Jumpgate, but it's going to be called Frack This
Podcast.
And you're on Blue Sky. Are there any other links you want to throw out there? Not really.
No, Blue Sky's the only one I like. I used to use Instagram a little bit, but like screw Meta. So Blue Sky's really the only one that I use at any point. So yeah,
and eventually Mastodon. I'm gonna push you to it.
I am on Mastodon. I need to use it more. I am on it. I was on it a while ago, but I never got super into it. But I should.
No, I get it. It's as a content creator, like 30 seconds. Mastodon has many benefits, most of which are not getting arbitrarily censored and not having to deal with like government overreach. But as a content creator, there's basically no searchability. There's no way to grow. So
that was
we do have
just
to
for my job. So,
kind of find a way to like use the mainstream ones to get people to come to your, like in my case, website. But that's a whole other thing. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope that anyone watching this video who's not already familiar with you checks out your stuff. In the page for this video, I will link to some of my favorite videos of yours. One more time, sign up for Nebula, go watch Identities, tell your friends about it, tell film, go spam Film Theory. It doesn't have to just be Film Theory. It's just that would be a great, like, getting more people aware of it. Watch Identities, subscribe to you on Patreon, even if it's the lowest tier, because it makes a difference when a whole lot of collective people help. And even though I honestly don't really have an interest in Stargate, I'll still try here. I'll try the series. It's just there's a lot of series out there. I'm limited on time. Blah 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 blah.
I think they're great. I mean, I'll pitch you on it, but I'll do it. We've already gone long enough, but I think you really should. I think they're very very good shows.
I did get Paramount Plus specifically to start watching Star Trek for you.
Good. Watch Deep Space Nine. It's the best one.
I'm planning to. And if you're watching this because you're a fan of Jessie Gender and you've never heard of me, like I said, the purpose of my content is to try to raise awareness about the bigotry, hypocrisy, etc. of gender-based censorship, and also to raise awareness about other subjects that maybe you weren't thinking about. The pitch I like to give to people at VidCon is that I'm using the allure of tits to trick people into learning about subjects that they weren't already necessarily looking for. Because talking about really long video essays and stuff, chances are someone's already going to be interested in that topic to click on a video like yours. Whereas I'm hoping to be like, oh, hey, tits. Oh, wait, cops are being murdered by, or sorry, black people are being murdered by cops, or, trans healthcare is under risk, being destroyed. So, feel free to go to my website, topics.org, and check out some of my other videos. And if you are or know anyone who would also be be interested in an interview, please have them contact me. Hopefully you have had a good experience and aren't gonna go tell all the other creators that you were it was horrible.
I had a fantastic experience. This was absolutely wonderful, and this was a really great conversation.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna stop recording now. Thank you.